We now come to the urgent question. Dame Priti Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Foreign Secretary if he'll make a statement on the talks held in London yesterday on the war in Ukraine.
Minister Doherty.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her question and indeed the continued support to the opposition for the united position that we take on Ukraine and our ironclad support for Ukraine. We remain fully committed to working with Ukraine and our international partners to secure a just and lasting peace. Our support for Ukraine is ironclad. Representatives of the United Kingdom, of France, of Germany and the United States convened in London yesterday with Ukraine for another round of intensive talks following up on the meeting in Paris last week. And all parties reiterated their strong support for President Trump's commitment to stopping the killing and achieving a just and lasting peace. The talks were productive and successful, and significant progress was made on reaching a common position on next steps, and all agreed to continue their close coordination and look forward to further talks soon. There was an E3 statement on this just last night. The Foreign Secretary had bilateral discussions with Foreign Minister Sabia and remains in close contact with his ministerial counterparts to give further details, and I hope the Right Honourable Lady will understand this, of the discussions would only benefit Putin. We condemn, Mr. Speaker, Russia's most brutal missile and drone attacks on civilians, including overnight absolutely horrific scenes, Mr. Speaker. And our thoughts are with the victims and their loved ones at this tragic time. These are simply shocking scenes, and of course they come on the back of shocking scenes not only in Kiev but in Kryvyi, in Sumy, in Marhanets and many other locations across Ukraine in recent days. And I would remind the House, Mr. Speaker, while Ukraine has been in peace talks, Russia has continued these severe attacks, including last night, and that is a stark reminder of the continued bloodshed and aggression perpetrated by Putin. I witnessed myself the terrible situation just weeks ago in Kiev when I visited, attacks on Bucha of all places just hours before I arrived. And indeed, not just those killings, but the continued shocking situation when it comes to the abduction of children, the attempts to wipe out Ukrainian culture, and Putin's demands remain undiminished. We are very, very clear about that. President Zelensky has shown his commitment to peace, Mr. Speaker. President Putin must now agree to a full and immediate ceasefire without conditions, as Ukraine has done. We will not stop in our efforts to work with all the parties to that end.
Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For all the talks that are taking place, it is concerning that a clear, unified front in support of Ukraine, which secures a peace on their terms, has yet to emerge. The Minister mentioned the E3 statement on yesterday's talks, but it consisted of 3 sentences and stated that the talks were productive and successful and significant progress was made in reaching a common position on the next steps. So can the Minister tell us exactly what was productive and successful about these talks and what the next steps actually are, and whether Ukraine is in agreement? Were security guarantees for Ukraine discussed and progress made on agreeing what they will be? Was the UK's long-standing position of supporting Ukraine's accession to NATO membership discussed? And following the abhorrent missile strike last night in Kyiv, which killed more innocent civilians, does he believe that Putin is committed to a just and fair end to this conflict? Can the Minister confirm whether the status of Crimea and other Ukrainian territories invaded and occupied unlawfully by Russia was discussed, and what the UK government's position is? The UK was the strongest advocate for Ukraine regaining all the territory taken by force by Putin, and for Putin to lose this war. Is this still the case? Mr. Speaker, there is much debate about the initiatives to end the war by negotiations, but we cannot forget that this war was started by Putin, a murderous, vile autocrat who is being propped up by an axis of authoritarian states trying to extinguish democracy in our own continent, and by those who are opposed to our values, including China, North Korea and Iran. We need the government to be leveraging British influence in every way possible for Ukraine. Our Ukrainian friends are on the front line, battling in an attempt to reshape the whole international order by force. I condemn the sanctioning, Mr. Speaker, of the 15 members yesterday by Russia. And to those colleagues, I will say this: it shows you're on the right side of history and that we must always stand up to tyranny. UK sanctions on Russia must stay in place. What is the government's position on applying secondary sanctions? And when will the billions of pounds worth of proceeds from the sale of Chelsea FC be made available now for Ukraine? Can the Minister explain why the government's £2.26 billion loan to Ukraine, backed by the profits of sanctioned assets, is being paid over 3 years rather than in full now? And finally, what more can the FCDO do to mobilise British technology, which could be cheap and cheaply applied to adapt Ukraine's military efforts?
Well done.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her questions and indeed her continued support and unity on these issues. I think it's a crucial signal that we send across this House, not only to our friends in Ukraine, but also to Putin, that this House will not be divided on these issues. We are united in our support for Ukraine, and I can absolutely reassure her of our absolute commitment to Ukraine. And indeed, there has been extensive ministerial contact over recent weeks. I myself met with Minister Sabir in Turkey just a week or so ago, and the Foreign Secretary obviously was with him yesterday, and contact remains at every level. She asked me a number of specific questions. I'm afraid I'm not, Mr. Speaker, going to go into the detail of the discussions yesterday. She will understand that. I know she has a job to do in holding to account on that, but I think it's really important this time that we allow those technical talks, those discussions to go on at that level between the principals, and she will understand why that's necessary. She asked specifically a number of things. I mean, firstly, I agree with her completely on her points made about members of this House and sanctions taken against them. Utterly condemn them. Again, this is just par for the course when it comes to Putin and his regime. She asked about what we are doing on sanctions. Absolutely, our commitment to sanctions remains undiminished. We are going to continue to maintain the pressure across every level. In fact, we are ramping up the pressure, Mr. Speaker, and today we have announced new sanctions, including the shocking repurposing of game console controllers to kill Ukrainians by Russia, and we are taking robust action at every step we can, not only directly to choke off the Russian war machine, but also when it comes to second and third country circumvention of those sanctions. And she can be assured I have spent a lot of time on this issue over recent weeks. She asks about the situation of Chelsea. I refer her to my previous comments on this. We're working at pace to meet the agreements that were made on that. She points out the importance of the Extraordinary Revenue Accelerator loan. The first tranche of that has been dispersed. In fact, I actually discussed this with the Deputy Finance Minister of Ukraine just a few weeks ago to make sure they actually had access to those resources. They do have access. I'm happy to write to her separately about the details in which the further tranches will be paid. There is absolutely no softening of our commitment to the coalition of the willing. Indeed, the Foreign Secretary met with French, US, German and Ukrainian counterparts last week, underlining our shared commitments, and we are leading a coalition of willing nations to defend Ukraine's security. We're not going to get into operational detail for obvious reasons. The Defence Secretary made that clear earlier this week. And she asks about Crimea. The UK's position regarding Ukrainian sovereignty is well known, and our position has not changed, and we do not recognise Russian sovereignty over any territory illegally seized from Ukraine, including Crimea. And when, how and on what terms this war comes to an end can only be decided by negotiations with Ukraine at the heart of them.
Bill Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree that, as one of the individuals who was sanctioned yesterday by the Kremlin, that if Putin is serious about securing any sort of lasting peace in Ukraine, he should stop the performative sanctioning of democratically elected members of this House and focus on stopping the murderous, barbaric killing of civilians in Ukraine and stop the invasion of that nation that we stand with in full support?
Again, I utterly condemn the sanctioning of members of this House, including my honourable friend. I'm on that list too, indeed, and many other members. It's completely unacceptable, but we're clear on that. I think he rightly points out the very nature of Russia's examples in recent days, the horrific attacks, the deaths, the killing, the continued aggression. Of course, it was Russia who is the aggressor in this conflict.
Jesuit Creary, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Mr. Speaker. Yes, overnight, Russia launched 11 ballistic missiles and nearly 200 cruise missiles and drones at civilian targets in Kiev. Yesterday's talks in London should have been an opportunity to strengthen the Western coalition's support for Ukraine in the face of Putin's barbarism. Instead, they were derailed by President Trump, who, in a petulant response to President Zelensky's refusal to countenance the recognition of Crimea,